Moscow, August the 25th, 1978. An earthquake hits KGB headquarters. In an extremely rare event, a KGB officer is arrested by his peers. Captain Orekhov's life is turned upside down.
Someone came to see me in my office and said, "Listen, there's a superior who wants to see you urgently." "Who's looking for me?" I asked. "The department deputy chief," he said. I think to myself, my God, the deputy chief, the top general. Why is he interested in me? They began talking, beating around the bush. And I said, "Why don't you come out and ask what you want? What do you want from me exactly?" They said, "Okay, we're conducting an internal investigation on you, and we'd like to ask you a few questions." "Please go ahead," I said. But to talk, they took me to Lefortovo prison. They put me into solitary confinement for 3 days, so that I could think things over, they said. Then they started to accuse me on specifics. "You've done this, you've done that, you warned this person and that person, you did this, you did that." I started to add up articles of the penal code in my head. At one point I thought, thank God I won't be shot.
Many of the KGB spies who went to the West became double agents. But there's only one case of an officer in charge of repressing dissidents who risked his life by joining their struggle for freedom. Viktor Orekhov is unique in the history of the Soviet Union. For 2 years, he protected dozens of dissidents, often without their knowledge. I went to Moscow to investigate his past and talk to dissidents and former members of the KGB. Viktor Orekhov left Russia leaving no trace or any possibility of returning home. After months of investigation in Moscow, Kiev, Ankara, New York and Los Angeles, I find Viktor Orekhov in the United States, where he lives an anonymous life, no identity, no telephone. Cut off from the world, without contact from family or friends, this man with an exceptional destiny has told his story to no one. For the first time since he left Russia, and after long reflection, Viktor Orekhov agrees to break years of forced silence, to leave his mark on history.
I didn't end up in the KGB by chance. I was raised in a family loyal to the Soviet state, its socialist ideals, and the Communist Party. That's why, when I finished my military service, I was considered as someone reliable, serious, and I was sent to the border guards. In the army, I was prepared to sit for examinations to enter the Kiev Polytechnic. Seeing that I was a serious student, my superior decided to send me to study at the KGB Institute. I began by studying Turkish culture and language, but also law, and especially techniques in intelligence and counterintelligence, everything that was top secret.
To be accepted into the prestigious KGB Academy is an honor, a privilege you don't refuse. This is where future spies are trained and sent to Soviet embassies in the four corners of the world. Others, like Viktor Orekhov, remain in Moscow, where they'll be in charge of ideological control.
I was extremely proud to find myself among KGB agents, as any young man would have been at the time. I knew that my work would involve great responsibility and that I would be part of the elite. Why do I say this? Everyone knew that the KGB was more important than any other state institution.
In 1970s Russia, the Soviets no longer believe in building a socialist Eden. There's growing unrest. Threats to the system not only come from the West, but also from within. KGB Director Yuri Andropov responds by creating the 5th Department in charge of surveillance and the repression of dissidents. It was out of the question for Soviet authorities to allow the dissidents to have a voice. Viktor Orekhov and his colleagues at the KGB monitor the protesters' every move 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Author of a major work on the KGB's history, Evgenia Albats was one of the first to encounter Captain Orekhov and consult his file.
Orekhov was a loyal and accomplished Soviet. He was convinced that the Soviet system was perfect, the best in the world. He worked in the 5th Department and knew its advantages. KGB agents who worked in the 5th Department had the right to read forbidden literature for research, such as Solzhenitsyn or Orwell, the author of 1984 and Animal Farm. It was while reading Solzhenitsyn that Orekhov was deeply shocked.
This literature could have a strong impression on people who questioned and thought about things. I think that at the time I had reached a certain maturity. I could reflect on things. And naturally, these books had a great influence on me. In particular, the Gulag archipelago. I was very proud to be the first in the Soviet Union to read the last volume of this book. Reading it, you felt the extent of the violence the Communist Party exercised on its people. These books showed how our country was under heavy totalitarian rule. It was as if people were imprisoned. That was the feeling it left me with.
Russian people begin to feel a need to open up to the outside world. They become aware of the system's failures and view their leaders with increasing contempt. The KGB, as the armed wing of the Soviet system, is seen as evil. This starts to play heavily on Orekhov's mind. He begins to ask questions. Should we punish young people searching for knowledge? He's deeply touched by them, whether they're dissidents or simply curious, anyone who takes risks to read forbidden literature. Viktor Orekhov begins to falsify his reports.
You think you have a useful role in society, but at the same time you're aware of the horrible things you do. This weighed heavily on my mind. For example, one day, 2 young girls of the Komsomol were prosecuted for having read a book by Amalrik entitled "Will the Soviet Union Survive Until 1984?" It wasn't very serious, but for this minor offense, they could have been excluded from the Young Communist League, kicked out of the Komsomol, and lose their jobs at the Weather Bureau. This is what would have happened if I'd acted like a true KGB agent, but I refused to wreck their lives. I wanted to be more measured when dealing with these kinds of offenses. Also, I didn't want people to think that the KGB was an organization that shattered people's lives without a reason. So I explained how they should answer the accusations and wrote the deposition with them. They had to pretend that they bought the book by accident, instead of a thriller or a romance that they wanted to buy at the Детский мир black market. I told them to say that someone had swapped this anti-Soviet book with the one they thought they had bought. They only discovered it when they arrived at work, and of course, it was too late to return it. Of course, they never read it or talked to anyone about it. How the KGB found out about the book, I don't know. Someone probably denounced them. I talked to the girls, and I made a false report so that the matter would be dismissed, be archived.
In order to improve its international image, the Soviet Union signs the 1975 Helsinki Accord, which commits it to respecting human rights. Now, those defending human rights in the USSR have a legal standing for their claims. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Andrei Sakharov, Anatoly Marchenko, Josif Brodsky, Yuri Orlov, Vladimir Bukovsky, and Galina Wisniewskaja-Rostropovich, the leaders of the dissidents, strongly oppose political repression and demand freedom of expression. One of Captain Orekhov's jobs is to control demonstrations held by dissidents. The militia is in charge of the dirty work, but Orekhov and his colleagues at the KGB's 5th Department give the orders.
In totalitarian countries, in closed societies, the authorities never know what they should be afraid of. The dissident movement was very small, but the authorities couldn't ignore it. It was very difficult to know and assess to what point the dissidents succeeded with the general population. Did their petitions and their speeches have any resonance? Did their protests have support from the general public? Did they join? Because of these unanswered questions, the KGB worked to exterminate these movements before they took root.
Faced with this situation, the party's Central Committee and the head of the KGB orders the 5th Department to remove dissident figureheads. The writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn is evicted from the Soviet Union. Orekhov and his colleagues take turns monitoring Andrei Sakharov around the clock. The authorities want to regain control of the population with an iron fist. For General Bobkov, director of the 5th Department, the primary objective is to protect the regime from the West.
When they say that we were fighting against the dissidents, they are saying something completely false, because we never fought against people who thought differently to us. But there were people in the Soviet Union who came into contact with foreign intelligence services and with anti-Soviet organizations based in the West. And these people worked to undermine our constitutional order. They were fighting against authority. And when the 5th Department took action against the dissidents, it was to defend them, to save them. The West began to protest, saying that we were persecuting the dissidents.
General Bobkov, like his superior Yuri Andropov, considers the dissidents to be mentally ill. Besides arrests, imprisonment, and the gulags, the authorities use psychiatric hospitals as a political weapon. The method is simple: to declare those who think differently as insane. The treatment used on the dissidents includes torture, leaving them scarred for life. The decision whether to commit people or not was up to the KGB's Fifth Department. At the time, Colonel Igor Prelin was an agent working in counterintelligence.
If the Fifth Department had not been created in 1967, and if we had done nothing, then the disintegration of the Soviet Union would have started much earlier. The Fifth Department delayed the end of the USSR by 20 years.
The Soviet Union has a paradoxical way of rewarding its people. The best officers, those who achieve the best grades, are sometimes given a trip to capitalist hell. In 1973, Viktor Orekhov is sent on a mission to Japan.
The KGB had a reward system for their best officers. It was to send them abroad. I was sent with the Bolshoi Ballet and Theater Company to Japan. They went there each year for 2.5 months during the summer. They had a contract with a major Japanese TV station. We were sent as guardians, observers, you could say. As KGB agents, we were sent to monitor the performers. I saw nothing of what our propaganda was saying. That there was poverty everywhere, apart from a few very rich people. I never saw queues in Japan. You could go to a store, buy what you wanted, and go home. But in our country, everyone suffered from shortages. There was nothing on shelves, and the queues were intolerable. We could see that Japanese people weren't living the life that we had in the Soviet Union, or what was being portrayed by our media. This meant that the information we got at home was exactly the opposite of the truth, completely wrong.
Back from Japan, Captain Viktor Orekhov is assigned new cases. Among them is a computer scientist known for distributing banned literature. His name, Mark Morozov.
I received reports so that I could verify the risk posed by a number of people. They were isolated dissidents who openly protested against the government. Among the reports was a file on Morozov. I tried to gain his confidence, but this was mostly to get hold of banned literature that I was interested in. My superiors insisted that I recruit him and turn him into a KGB informant in order to obtain information on his relationships. I was sure that we weren't going to turn him into an informant. He was the sort of person who could accidentally give us information, but I was sure he wouldn't cooperate with the KGB. I borrowed some of his banned books, those that I would normally confiscate. What we should have done is the following. Search his home and confiscate everything, which would be enough to put him in prison for a very long time. He began to trust me, and I said to him, as an honest man, I give you my word that I will return these books and not mention this to anyone.
The two men develop a friendship. Morozov, who trusts Orekhov, supplies him with forbidden literature. From now on, Orekhov's wish to do the right thing overrides any concerns for his own safety. He sees no future for a Soviet society based on fear and lies. He supports the dissidents' ideals and decides to help them. fully aware of the risks and without any illusion about the eventual outcome.
I would pick a phone number, knowing that it was under surveillance. I then went to a phone booth and calmly called, talking with a handkerchief over the mouthpiece to disguise my voice and avoid any possible inquiry at a later date. I'd say, "This is a warning. Tomorrow you will be searched." Or, "Your phone is tapped, but not that of such and such." Or, "You must notify your friends and tell them to get rid of the contraband literature." That's what I was doing.
Ludmila Alexieva is a very active dissident and one of the first to receive an anonymous call from Orekhov.
One day, someone I didn't know phoned me. I couldn't tell from the voice whether it was a man or woman because they were disguising it. They spoke with an aging voice. "Tomorrow you will have a pest control treatment." I replied, "What pest control? I didn't ask for one." And they said, "Think about it. Tomorrow you will have a pest control." I said, "I don't understand. I didn't ask for a pest control. I don't have rats. I don't have cockroaches." They continued, "But listen to me carefully." I hung up thinking it was a joke. Next morning they came to search my home. I didn't know who called me, but it was then that I realized that someone tried to warn me.
Alexander Podrabinek and his brother Kirill were in their 20s when they joined the dissidents.
It was a bizarre situation. You know, when they did a search, first they collected the documents, books, audio tapes. They sorted them, putting the things that interested them in one pile and what didn't interest them in another. As the search continued, the piles grew, but one pile grew faster than the other. I looked and I noticed that one of the KGB agents was not doing what he should be. I knew that certain documents could be of interest to their investigation, but he put them in the pile that was of no interest.
I started taking things and classified them in two different piles. I found something that interested us, I flicked through it, and I saw that it was exactly what we wanted. It was why we came here to search. First of all, I put it on the pile that didn't interest us. I then picked it up again, and I gave it to him. I told him, "This, put it where you want, it doesn't interest us." He looked at me strangely, as if he couldn't believe his eyes and ears.
I was really surprised. I thought to myself, this guy is crazy. Maybe he's not really a KGB agent. Or he's just young and incompetent. Years later, Orekhov told me that he did it deliberately because some documents could be dangerous. So he put them in the pile that was of no interest to the KGB.
On the pretext of trying to recruit Mark Morozov as a KGB informant, Viktor Orekhov meets him to pass information on to the dissidents. A complicity forms between the two men.
Mark Morozov often came to my home. He was very friendly, always willing to help others. However, he didn't appear to be someone you could fully trust or you could count on. He began to tell me about a KGB agent who, during the whole interrogation, said that he supported the dissidents and that he would like to help them. Morozov suggested that he would come to his place for tea. He asked me if I wanted to come and meet the KGB officer. I said definitely not, and added, Mark, I ask you, no, I insist, that you give up this idea. You can't let him into your home.
Among his assignments, Captain Orekhov is put in charge of Alexander Gotovtsev-Rossiyski, a dissident who distributes anti-Soviet leaflets and never misses an event at Pushkin Square.
The first time I saw Orekhov was at Morozov's apartment. We were in the neighborhood with his daughter, so we decided to pay him an impromptu visit. There were always dissidents at Morozov's home. It was a real refuge. But this time it was empty. We thought he was alone. Morozov was very embarrassed when we entered the kitchen. We saw that he wasn't alone. He didn't introduce us. Orekhov was also very uneasy to see us. We could see that they were having a confidential discussion. To ease the atmosphere, we said that we were just passing through, that we were in a hurry, and we left.
We would meet on official terms. We had a file on him, saying that he was a potential recruit, and I had to try and persuade him to cooperate with the KGB, so I had the right to meet him formally. Each time I met him, I made out a report. On each visit, I would bring a tape recorder, but before I turned it on, I warned him, from now on, anything you say will be recorded. I also received information from bugged apartments or from office colleagues who gave me information. I would ask them, as we often did, so, these dissidents, did they meet in this apartment? They would say, yes, they spoke to embassy people, foreign correspondents. So, based on information from the KGB, I could write a report on Morozov as if it was him who gave me the information without harming anyone.
A few days later, he came to my house and said that the KGB agent came to his apartment for tea and had a very interesting discussion. And I said to him, Mark, I asked you not to see him in your home. You promised me that you would refuse to see him, but you went and did it anyway. Forgive me, but from now on, I have to ask you to never come to my apartment again.
I had no chance with other dissidents. I knew they wouldn't trust me. I knew much less about them than I did of Morozov. Besides, other KGB agents were assigned to their cases. What could I do? Go see them and say, hi, I'm from the KGB and I want to help you? And then what? It would have come out immediately, and the KGB would instantly know that one of their agents went to see these dissidents offering help. So I couldn't help them. It would have blown my cover.
Viktor Orekhov is under no illusion. He knows that the dissidents could not keep this secret for long, and that their negligence would eventually prove fatal. But there was no going back. Eta sudba, as they say in Russian. It's destiny. The die is cast.
He started giving information on KGB activities using the dissident Mark Morozov as a go-between. The information was on upcoming raids, on arrests, or wiretaps. They had code names: T for Tatiana, an S for Sergei. Tatiana meant an apartment was bugged, and Sergei, a phone was tapped. As a KGB officer, he knew all about ongoing operations. He knew who was being watched, where they were put listening devices, and what the KGB was planning.
Every day, Captain Orekhov takes more and more risks to pass on information and protect the dissidents. Because Morozov's apartment is bugged, the KGB know that he's receiving information from one of their agents. Mark Morozov is arrested and imprisoned at Lefortovo. After intensive interrogation, the KGB finally get him to confess.
As often happens, prison reveals a person's true nature. Prison is like an X-ray that strips people to what they really are. Mark Morozov didn't pass the test. He broke down and confessed everything. He denounced and betrayed Orekhov. He was the only witness to be used against him.
Knowing how the KGB works and how the dissidents used the information provided by Morozov, I doubted that this would last a long time. For example, just before my arrest, I realized that I was followed by the surveillance service. I knew who they were because I worked with them before.
We began to have suspicions, as always happens in these types of cases. When there are leaks, an internal investigation takes place. We established Orekhov's involvement. He was arrested and sentenced to the Gulag for 8 years.
Viktor Orekhov is now on a path that leads dissidents to the gulags, essential for redemption and repentance. He serves his sentence in Camp Morki for re-education through labor, where living conditions are deliberately harsh.
The electric heating never worked in the barracks. During winter, it only took 2 days for the walls to be covered with ice 10 to 15 centimeters thick, inside the barracks. We often brought a piece of sheet metal into the barracks and lit a fire on top to keep warm. When there weren't many people in camp, we took the extra mattresses, sandwiched ourselves between them, and slept in our clothes. The food was horrible. Porridge of oats or buckwheat. We also had a soup with cabbage but there was no meat because the guards routinely stole it.
Неважно какую, но в основном, и, естественно, это большинство вылавливалось.
In a month, I lost 15 kilograms.
После месяца на зоне я похудел на 15 килограмм.
Imprisoned in camps reserved for political prisoners, first Perm, then Chistopol, Mark Morozov commits suicide in his cell. After 8 years in the gulags, Viktor Orekhov returns to Moscow. The country is in the midst of perestroika. He finds work in a factory warehouse and tries to start over again and rebuild his life. Times have changed. History proves Orekhov right, but it does him no good. The Berlin Wall falls. The Soviet Union breathes its last breath. The KGB is replaced by the FSB, but the men in power stay the same. In February 1991, journalist Igor Gamayunov from Moscow's leading newspaper Literaturnaya Gazeta was the first to tell Orekhov's story.
Он меня просто удивил тем, что человек по характеру...
He surprised me because, coming from the military, he should be a man of discipline with preset ideas.
Человеком дисциплины, человеком, который мыслит штампами.
But this man was the opposite. He was a free thinker.
Он был живой. Он цитировал...
He quoted poetry
Он цитировал...
and philosophical text. Of course, I was stunned.
Ну и, естественно, я был этим просто ошарашен.
I asked him to tell me everything that happened to him, and I wrote the first article.
Произошло и написал первую статью.
After it was published, I received a phone call from a woman saying, "You wrote an article on a certain Orekhov, the Orekhov who helped dissidents."
И мне сказали, вот у вас очерк об Орехове. Это тот самый
Yes, I
Орехов,
answered,
который помогал
and asked,
диссидентам.
"Who are you?"
Я говорю, да, судя по его рассказу.
We are the dissidents that he helped.
Самые диссиденты, которые
We want to see him.
он помогал.
Could you give us his phone number,
Хотим с ним
please?
встретиться.
I said,
Дайте его
"Of course I'll give it to you,
пожалуйста, телефон я дам,
even though I shouldn't.
хотя это не совсем
First,
ловко.
I'll call him to agree on a venue. We organized to meet near metro
Делать
Kropotynskaya.
встречи. Встреча на Кропоткинской.
The dissident Kirill Podrabinek, Alexander's brother, had no idea that Viktor Orekhov protected him before he was arrested and sent to Siberia in 1978. It's a great surprise when he discovers that his guardian angel is still alive and back in Moscow. He naturally goes to the meeting organized by Igor Gamayunov.
Certainly, some of us dissidents felt some guilt. We felt that we owed him a great deal. He risked his life for us, all the while being a stranger. He wasn't one of us, yet he did so much for us. We obviously feel a sense of gratitude.
И мы с ним вместе поехали на Кропоткинскую.
Viktor Orekhov and I went to Kropotynskaya to meet the dissidents.
Ну, совершенно
There, I witnessed a very moving scene.
потому что те диссиденты,
These dissidents who spent a long time in prison, and some who never saw his face, threw themselves at him.
они его в лицо не знали.
We didn't want to touch him as if he was a relic, but we wanted to reach out to this captain, Viktor Orekhov. Everyone wanted to see him. There are a lot of people. A crowd gathered around him, and everyone wanted to meet him.
Он для них был миф, легенда, человек,
For them, he was a myth, a legend, someone who was only a shadow in their lives. But he saved some from arrest and helped others to hide their banned books before a raid. On seeing him for real, they threw themselves at him. And you know, at Kropotinskaya, there was a newsagent window, and they literally pressed his back against the window. They touched him and asked him, "This isn't possible. Is it really you?"
A new life begins for Viktor. A new mission awaits him, this time alongside the dissidents.
Узнали, что я жив и здоровый, что это тот самый человек, бывший
When they learned that I was still alive and was the KGB agent who had helped them,
тоже позвонил, Витя, ёлки-палки.
Sergei Grigorians called me and said,
Вот, ты знаешь, мы же проводим...
"Victor, we're organizing conferences on the KGB yesterday, today, tomorrow.
Конференции наши.
It's very important.
Вот, и я вместе с ним
You absolutely have to take part."
занимался вопросами о том,
I started working with them.
о работе КГБ.
I was the expert, the consultant,
с участием
and
сотрудников.
participated in the conferences as a former KGB officer.
Всегда спрашивал,
And I was asked,
правда, это правда?
"Is this true? Is that true?"
Что я работаю нормально, и
Sergei found my work very useful, and he put me in charge of lectures on themes such as the KGB and psychiatry, or the KGB and dissidents.
конкретные, когда лица были.
And sometimes I was sent to defend people on trial as an expert and representative of a civil organization.
Организацию меня туда направлял.
This situation doesn't please the likes of General Trofimov, Viktor's former superior, now second in command of the FSB.
He was involved in many political affairs, and he investigated Orekhov's case. He had no principles, and he was very cynical, but also intelligent and very professional. This is why he had a successful career.
On May the 10th, 1995, Viktor makes a careless mistake.
У одного парня был какой-то...
A colleague of mine had a fake gun.
Ну, собственно говоря, он выглядел
In truth,
как пугач.
it didn't even look very real. It didn't fire, and I had no ammunition.
Ну и мы куда-то ехали. Вот, и
One evening, we set off
я
somewhere,
его
and I put it in the car, just in
мало
case.
ли, остановят эксцессы какие-то были, все
It
прочее.
was just for show.
Я его взял просто чисто как пугач. Вот, милиция
The
остановила.
police stopped us.
Вот. И начали
Without thinking, I told them to go ahead and search the car, and they found the gun.
Вот, меня задержали на ночь, потом
They
утром
kept me overnight
составили
and wrote a report.
И, собственно говоря,
And the story
на
should have
этом
ended
должно
there.
было бы все кончиться.
Дело в том, что когда вся эта история началась, когда только
When it
возбудили,
started,
Орешков отнесся к этому очень
Orekhov
серьезно.
didn't take this story
Ну,
seriously.
действительно, там его
Of course,
задержали с,
he was arrested with a
испорченным
fake
пистолетом,
gun.
который по существу не был никаким оружием.
But you have to remember that it was during the mid-90s, when everyone carried a gun to protect themselves from gangs. When he was arrested, he didn't hide the gun. He thought it would end there. But the story ends differently. Apparently, during their inquiries, they find that Viktor Orekhov was the same Orekhov who did 8 years in the Gulag for helping dissidents during the Soviet era. In 1995, the director of the FSB in Moscow, the successor to the KGB, was General Trofimov. He was Orekhov's former colleague and knew of the first case against him perfectly well. And I think he was even in charge of his first conviction. There were rumors circulating that when Trofimov learned that Orekhov was the subject of an investigation, he made sure that the case would stay open and end up badly for Orekhov. The KGB was taking revenge. This could be revenge by the KGB, but we had to know if he actually owned the gun or if it was planted, which we in the services often did by hiding things in someone's possessions, such as weapons or drugs, followed by arresting them, accusing and condemning them.
On July the 21st, 1995, Viktor Orekhov goes to court feeling confident, but on hearing the verdict, he's in shock. He's sentenced to 3 years imprisonment in a labor camp for the re-education of repeat offenders. News of Orekhov's arrest spreads throughout the city. His dissident friends are in shock. They mobilize, demonstrate, and set up a committee to support calls for his release.
These were methods that the KGB used and still do today. They had every reason to take revenge on Orekhov. When they put us dissidents in jail, KGB agents would get stars on their shoulders. But when Orekhov betrayed them, they lost all their stars. Of course they hated him.
In the meantime, Viktor Orekhov serves his sentence at Camp Chelyabinsk in the Urals. It's a hard labor camp for repeat offenders where cruelty and violence are part of daily prison life. No one can see in. It's another society with its own set of special rules. Thanks to the committee's actions and support, plus an appeal to the Supreme Court, Viktor Orekhov's sentence is reduced to 1 year. His early release hits the headlines, and he's a guest on Hero of the Day, a popular Russian television show on NTV. Do you have hope for the future to regain your strength and start a new and normal life?
I doubt that I can have a normal life. And in general, you know, I doubt that they'll let me live quietly because of what I saw. I can't keep quiet. I couldn't live without saying anything, without denouncing. I want to keep talking about it. This situation scares me. It shouldn't be this way. And of course, sooner or later, I know they'll take revenge.
Do you think the people who want to take revenge on you are your former KGB colleagues who you worked with in the 70s?
If it's not them directly, they'll do it through others. Everyone told me, Victor, what are you waiting for? They'll kill you and say that it was the street gangs who did it. Everyone insisted that I leave. My mother told me that Trofimov vowed to take revenge and said, I'll get him one way or another. He'll be dead soon. One day, a representative of the U.S. Embassy came to see me. He said that he had information of plans to kill me. There was a contract on my head. We went to the U.S. Embassy, and because I had a release certificate from jail, they issued me a visa within half an hour.
On April the 11th, 1997, Viktor Orekhov goes into exile in the USA. I find him in the United States, a broken man, alone and abandoned by everyone. But despite everything, he has no regrets and insists that if he had to do it again, he would do it without hesitation. He's still consumed by nostalgia. Despite being relatively safe in the United States, he's never found peace or meaning here.
Hi, do you order pizza?
Yep. How much?
Oops.
Careful.
It's all what you have.
Oh,
Okay, thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night. Я не могу сказать, что я недоволен.
I can't say that I'm unhappy with my living conditions.
Я недоволен тем,
I'm unhappy because I'm not doing what I want. I'm not part of anything.
не участвую ни в каких мероприятиях и вообще.
I'm like someone who,
так, как бы,
when you catch a
ну, знаете,
fish,
когда
instead of frying it, you put it in a small jar and say, let it rot here until it dies.
Ну, пускай живет, может, проживет столько.
That's exactly what it feels like here.
Такое же состояние, абсолютно.